What if you created an AI best friend and she knew all your secrets and would kill to keep you to herself? Aletheia was her own character. So I tried to really just write her. She has her own backstory. It's scant because Penn didn't want to give her too much of a backstory, but she starts off believing that she's the goddess of truth. That's her backstory. Yeah. So I wrote it from that perspective of how would Aletheia feel in this situation? And what does Aletheia want? You know, you ask when you're writing, what does my character want? What are they willing to do to get it? And so I looked at that with both my human characters and with Aletheia.
Welcome to the Thriller Writer Lab, where every thriller goes under the microscope, one book at a time. I'm your host, Mark Nadeau, and this is where best-selling, award-winning, and emerging thriller authors share their craft, research, and real-world experiences that power today's most gripping stories. Joining me today is Nan Fisher, writing under the pen name Cleo Ballard, author of the domestic thriller This Is a Lie, and I have the book. I just put it on camera. Thank you so much for being here, Nan.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited to talk about this book. And as I was just mentioning, there are some triggering moments in this book for me that I can't wait to discuss and why you did these things and your choices for doing it. Before we get into that, let's hear your pitch. Pitch me This Is a Lie.
Well, This Is a Lie is a domestic suspense thriller, and it's perfect for fans who love Blake Crouch, Frida McFadden, Ruth Ware, or movies like Her or Ex Machina, Megan, or Fatal Attraction. And I guess the hook would be, what if you created an AI best friend and she knew all your secrets and would kill to keep you to herself? And so This Is a Lie is about Penn, who was studying to get her PhD in computer sciences. She becomes pregnant, she leaves her studies and marries the father of her daughter. And she lives this perfectly curated or seemingly perfectly curated life in San Francisco. But when she discovers that her husband, best friends, and even her daughter have betrayed her, Penn's world is completely shattered. So she returns to her PhD unfinished thesis, and she creates a different kind of lie detector. And launching off that, she creates an AI best friend named Aletheia. And Aletheia's prime directive is basically to detect lies, which she can do with 100% accuracy, and also to protect Penn from being hurt again. Unfortunately, Aletheia soon takes protection to mean destruction and elimination of anyone that she deems has hurt Penn. And Penn has to figure out a way to stop her monster before Aletheia destroys everyone that Penn loves.
Awesome. Thank you. Love the pitch. Sure. Really enjoyed the book. So where did this idea come from? What came first? Was it the betrayal and the family and the what would I do in this situation? Or was it the AI and what would happen if an AI just decided to go after other people?
So the idea really came from a funny conversation with a friend who was joking around that she wanted to start a company called Honest Feedback. And the idea would be that when you ask your friends for honest feedback, they don't really give it to you. So you would go to this company and you would hire this person and you'd say to this person, for example, like, all my friends went to Vegas and they didn't invite me and I don't know why and they won't tell me. And the person who works for Honest Feedback would talk to your friends, get the real story, come back to you and say, well, Mark, they didn't invite you because you get drunk or you're really loud or you're embarrassing or for whatever reason. And then I realized that wouldn't work because your friends would never tell the truth because it would get back to you. And then I thought, who would tell the truth? Well, an AI best friend would tell the truth. And so I thought that could have some issues with it, considering AI and the technology and how we don't really have a firm control on it. Yeah. But also I started wondering what kind of person would need an AI best friend. And it would have to be a person who had some insecurities and maybe some imposter syndrome. And if that kind of person teamed up with an AI best friend, bad things could happen based on their own insecurities, their past traumas, and based on AI as a technology that has no ability to empathize with the situation, and that just works straight from logic. And that's kind of how it started. And I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't just a story about friendships, but it was also a story with technology woven through it.
And how did you build the moments differentiating her and her friendships with her friendships, like her real friends, the lies as a craft, and the AI and the honest feedback?
Well, I think with her real friends, those are just very real relationships which aren't black or white. Whereas a friendship with Aletheia is black and white, and she doesn't hold Aletheia to the same standards or even expect necessarily kindness that she would from her friends. So they're just inherently so different because it's human to human versus human to technology.
Yeah. And how did you go about writing it? Did you visualize her in your mind when you're writing it? Do you visualize, okay, she's talking to an AI and you're trying to put yourself in the role of what an AI would sound like? Or is it like this AI is trying to be human in a very flawed way, kind of like villains are often flawed in the way they think? Because they are the hero of their journey, but it's interesting because in this case, the AI is her hero of its own journey, so to speak. It's interesting.
Yeah, like Aletheia was her own character. So I tried to really just write her. She has her own backstory. It's scant because Penn didn't want to give her too much of a backstory, but she starts off believing that she's the goddess of truth. Right. That's her backstory. Yeah. So I wrote it from that perspective of how would Aletheia feel in this situation? And what does Aletheia want? You know, you ask when you're writing, what does my character want? What are they willing to do to get it? And so I looked at that with both my human characters and with Aletheia.
Okay. And when you're writing, do you write with themes or warnings in mind where you hope people will kind of walk away with a message when they put the book down, like they're thinking this AI can be dangerous, as it was in this case when used in this way? Or is it mostly entertainment?
Well, I'm a pantser when I write. I don't plot anything out. Okay. So I'm trying to entertain myself as I go.
Okay.
And it's always what would happen next? How would this character react? What could happen? How could things devolve? But I'm never thinking that there's necessarily a message to anything I write. Although I do always try and tackle themes of, core beliefs, imposter syndrome, how who you believe you are impacts the choices you make. And in this story in particular, there's an underlying theme of finding your joy and knowing that you're not in the right place and not allowing momentum to carry you forward, but maybe becoming more aware and deciding to pivot. And so I guess at the end of the story, I hope some of those things are things that readers are maybe going to take away. But ultimately, I just want them to say, like, great yarn, well told, which is what my dad always said when he finished a great book. He'd close it and he'd go, great yarn, well told. And it's like, that's what I'm striving for.
Okay. And you have a dedication in your book to Henry. It's at the beginning. You kind of mentioned him in the end as well. You call him your adventure buddy, rain or shine. In what ways has he helped with making this book possible and what the product that we are reading today?
In every way. I always say there's before Henry and after Henry. Henry's my husband. And after Henry is like life just got so much better. He is somebody who helps me find balance. Writers sit for long periods of time by themselves and just, it's, what it's like. It's very quiet, and having someone who pulls you away from your desk and gets you outside. And we just love, we always say couples that play together, stay together. We love playing together. So he's my balance in life for sure.
Awesome. Does he have any role in the production of the book as well?
Oh yeah. Anything technological. I am an English major. I hardly know how to work my own computer. I was like a Microsoft Word, email, pretty much that's it. And whenever I write something, like, there's a lot of technology in this book, which I had to understand and then pare back so that I didn't bore the reader too much. Yeah. And so when there were things like open source coding, things that I didn't really understand, even how to create you're creating an AI best friend. And so I went down that rabbit hole and I created an AI best friend, and I gave her Ursula Le Guin's voice. And then I asked her to do horrible things like hack people's, into people's texts and stuff. And she kept saying no. And then finally she told me to get therapy. But by talking with Henry about like, how would I get around those things? How would I get around like it, the guidelines and the barriers that are set up so that you can't hack into different programs. He's really good at, technology. And so he could kind of talk me through it. So, or he'll read something, he'll say, absolutely not. That cannot happen that way. That makes no sense. So he helps with those aspects.
Okay. Is there a moment where Penn's story, I guess, it felt real, like it was rooted in this may just be speaking to your talent as a writer, but I connected with Penn fairly fast. I mean, your relationship with your husband sounds amazing, which is the opposite of what Penn and Bruce go through. And they have her daughter who also leaves her. These are all very tragic, very, I guess for me, I could use the word triggering, because I've been through, moments where similar things have happened, and it's really difficult. And it felt authentic in her responses to the trauma and how she was trying to process, and how she went to an AI best friend because she's a genius and created this thing, which is different than most of us can do. But a lot of the things she did felt authentic. How did you create that authenticity?
Well, thank you. First of all, that makes me feel great. So I'm really glad that you felt that way. I have this basic premise whenever I'm writing a character, is that people only care about people they know or think they know. And so if I was just telling like my story, like it would be boring, right? So you have to have a character that has like a more interesting backstory. And so I really spend a lot of time trying to create a character who has a backstory that can carry through their lives. And so people understand why they're doing what they're doing. There are times in the story that you might want to scream at Penn and say like, don't go into the attic that has no way to get out, or the basement or whatever. But you can understand why she does what she does based on her childhood and the core beliefs that she has about herself, about being unworthy, about being an imposter in this world that she's now living in, about her desperate need for connection and friendships and certainty. So if you give a character a really great backstory that is relatable, understandable, makes sense, then they'll feel more authentic carrying through the entire novel.
Yeah. So as a pantser, if we zoom out a little bit, when you create her, do you just start with like Penn said, kind of boom, that's it, you drop her in and then you're figuring out as you go? Or do you still have a little bit of character profile? Because you have your idea. I imagine you have some idea of the story before you start writing it. Yes. A little bit, so that, was she there as a character and some of her traumas sort of vaguely in place as you wrote this story?
I knew that she had to be this really insecure woman. And I knew that she had to be someone who didn't feel comfortable in her own skin. And I knew that she had to be someone who was looking for security, because if she wasn't going to get it from her marriage, she needed to find it from somewhere else. But all of the Mama J chapters and that backstory happened after I had the entire first draft written, because I realized it was pretty, and it doesn't always happen that way for me. Mm-hmm. But I found myself trying to explain too much through the story, the things that had happened to her. And instead of doing that, I went back and I created all the Mama J chapters so I could show her evolution. And I don't usually do it that way, but that's just the way it worked out when I realized I had like 2 dimensions at the end of it and not 3 dimensions, and that I didn't care enough about Penn yet to understand her and want to follow her story.
What draft was that second draft that you realized you needed to add in that additional stuff?
Yeah. And then figuring out where to put it so that it was related to, so I wrote all the Mama J chapters separately to show her evolution. And then I went back and looked at it and said, where would these fit in? And then I tweaked the chapters so that there were some things mirroring other things and that would tie together for the reader.
Okay. That's fascinating. I'm glad you did, because it was a much stronger story for
Oh,
that whole layer of feeling her as a character, for sure. That must have been a
thank
lot of work. Was that like, oh God, what have I done? Now I got to go figure this out.
It wasn't as bad. Like the very first book that I ever wrote was a sport autobiography that I co-wrote with Bella Caroli, who's he was an Olympic gymnastic coach. He coached Nadia Comaneci and stuff. And I was 22. I'd never written a book before. I had written a proposal for his project that got kind of put in the pile with other proposals. And then he read mine and called me, and I flew to his ranch and spent a weekend with Bella and his wife Marta, just kind of playing around at the ranch, driving four wheelers. And at the end, he was like, I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Yeah, you got the job." And then I said, "You shouldn't give me this job. I have no idea what I'm doing." So for him, I had hundreds of hours of tapes that I then transcribed, and then I wrote them as separate chapters because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I had them all on my apartment floor, and I had to kind of go through and pick them and weave them together. So that was way worse.
Okay, yeah, that sounds hard too. So that brings me to a question then of, so Cleo Ballard, this is book one for her. How many books is this? What book is this for you? What does it represent overall?
I think this is, I haven't counted, but this is like 13 or 14
Okay.
or something with the sport autobiographies. I wrote Star Wars books for Lucasfilm, a trilogy. I wrote two young adult novels, two adult, and now this is my first thriller, or, domestic suspense thriller. And I think what it means for me is like I'm always pivoting. I'm always trying to, I never want to stick with one thing and just have momentum, or I'd still be writing sport autobiographies, which was fun, but it wasn't my story. Same with Star Wars books, fun, not my story. Loved writing YA, but ultimately it felt like too narrow a lane because of kind of what was going on in the cultural climate.
Yeah.
You get judged pretty quickly, and you can get canceled pretty quickly when you're writing young adult. And then adult novels, super fun, but like I did that, and then I'm like, what genre should I switch to now? I want to be uncomfortable. I want to try new things. I want to write different kinds of books. So for me, this is just like another step in the evolution of writing.
Okay. And the pen name you chose, why the pen name and not just roll with your author name and hope that the audience carries over?
Different genre. So my agent and the publisher thought it would be a good idea. And, a debut in a different genre hopefully gets a little more attention.
Okay.
So for all of those reasons, and it's kind of fun to have a different persona.
Okay. Do you find yourself, like when you're on social or whatever, are you like playing Cleo? Is she a different person to you just for fun?
No, not really. I'm not a great social media person. So I think it's a good idea. I should do that. But a lot of times I'll post as Nan and make Cleo the collaborator, or vice versa, and just kind of post them together.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I think it would be fun to create, or even if you, well, I guess it would be a character. I've heard of people doing it with characters, where a writer will go on social and their character will like do a takeover of their Instagram account, which is way too creative, and too much thought goes into that for me, but I love it though. It's very cool.
It would be really fun to do as Aletheia.
Yeah.
But I think
Yes.
I get crumpled pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be dangerous. Yeah. Especially in today's climate. We're like a few years away from that being a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So there's an opening quote also in your book from Mary Shelley: "Beware, I am fearless and therefore powerful." What did that mean to you in the context of the book?
Well, Frankenstein definitely had some impact on writing this, as did, a lot of The Terminator, a lot of other things. But, in Frankenstein, Victor creates his monster as a way of controlling life and death after the death of his mother. And that the irony is that his creation ends up turning on him. And that is very similar to what happens in This Is a Lie. So, and that was just one of the novels too that, as a young reader, had a real impact on me. That was so powerful. So I always like to give a nod back to all the different books that have kind of shaped what I write and why I write.
Oh, fun. Do you include that kind of quote in all your books at the beginning?
Yeah, there's usually some sort of quote or there's some reference to Greek mythology in a lot of the books that I write, because Greek myths were some of the first books that I read. And my parents had like a set as a kid of Greek myths. And I mean, they're so dark and powerful, and they're all about jealousy and greed and hatred and revenge. And so I usually try and include things like that. I also always include the name Boone in every book I write, because Boone was the name of our dog, and he passed a few years ago, but I just like the idea of keeping him alive through the story.
That's cute. Yeah. So what kind of challenge, you've written a lot of books. What kind of challenge did this represent, and what have you kind of learned or changed along the way? I guess as a pantser, if you've always been a pantser, then you're kind of, that's your process. But what challenges does that represent, especially in the context of this particular book?
Well, I think the challenge of being a pantser is that you can write yourself into a corner pretty easily. And then you have to figure out, how do I get out of it? And I think I can't reference particular moments along the way, but there were a lot of moments along the way where I had to like stop writing, get on my bike. I love road biking, and it really and suffering because it clears my head. So I would go for like a 3 or 4 hour road bike ride and do something hard. And then I could come back and I could see my way outside of the box that I'd written myself into. So more like that. Like when you're a pantser, a lot of times, because you're not plotting things out, you do write yourself into a corner. Yeah. At the same time, I think when you plot things out, for me anyway, it stops my creativity, because I'm never really asking what if. I'm trying to get to the next plot point, which for me, like, just stifles where my brain will go. So all of those things.
And when you're asking what if to yourself, are you asking what if in all forms of like plot, character, pacing, like how do I move this faster? How do I develop this person? Is it all those things that kind of run through your mind at the same time?
It's more like, what would make this exciting? What would make this more complicated? What would challenge my character more and ultimately force her to that darkest place where she has to make a really huge, like at the end of the book, where, I want to push my character to the brink of disaster, especially for a thriller, but also for their emotional journey. I really want my characters to start out in one place and end in another. It's funny because I love those Jack Reacher novels, and I always read them on an airplane because I know what's going to happen. I know he's like a lone wolf guy with a good heart who's going to end up in a small town, get pulled into a controversy, knock a lot of heads together. Some people may die, but in the end, he's going to help someone and then he's going to move on. Yeah. I love those, but I don't write those. I don't want to know what's going to happen in anything that I write when I'm writing it. I just want to know that there's going to be an emotional journey that's fulfilling.
Okay. Why did you choose to start this book near the end? You have that opening moment. For those who haven't read the book, you have an opening moment where essentially not quite the end, but we see very close to the end, a very tense moment. And then we jump into, I guess, the past, which becomes most of the novel's present.
Because it's a domestic suspense thriller, and because the setup, I always want to take enough time for people to get to know the character. But when you're getting to know a character and their backstory, that's not exactly a signal of a thriller, And so I wanted to start it off with the promise to the reader, like, we're going to get there.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do want you to know who Penn is, and I do want you to care about her before we launch.
Yeah. I have found that to be one of the greatest challenges with opening a book, because of I need you to like the character, but I need to get the book moving, especially when it comes to thrillers. Other genres have it easier, but it can be really challenging because you're thinking, I need this reader to read the next page, the next word, the next paragraph, the next everything. And that's a great way to approach it, I think, was starting a little bit later.
Right, as an author, it's like so challenging because you've got an editor who's saying, I want your inciting incident by page 20.
Yeah.
And you're like, but you're not going to care about my character by page 20. Yeah. I'm just getting into it. So it is like a huge challenge, and you don't always want to start near the end or whatever, but
Yeah.
you do want to start with something that promises the reader they're going to get what they paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it hard. I love books that are written in this way. And I don't mind like a slower start, even in a thriller, because for that very reason, because I care very much about characters. That's what sells me on a book. But I also read, especially for the podcast, action thrillers where they start and they jump in the middle of action and there's gunfights and explosions. And I'm like, I don't yet care if this person dies. So I hope we go
Right.
back and learn something about them, because like guns and explosions and stuff are fine. It's probably because it's not my genre. I know it works very well for people who read that and enjoy it, but I find that a challenge on the other end.
Well, I think that's why like the current James Bond movie with Daniel Craig, those were so much better for me, because even though there were car chases and crazy things happening, he had a backstory that you really saw, and that's what made me want to watch. And I'm not the typical James Bond watching person, but still, like those pulled me in.
Yeah.
So same with novels,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. The social media network you built, Live Loud, as a social platform, was that also a bit of a warning to people about the artificial nature and harm of social media? I don't know, maybe you're just hitting me in all the chords in this book, but I felt like that was like a warning to, because a lot of this book functions on the need for social media. This isn't a book, if social media doesn't exist, or obviously if AI doesn't exist, but if social media didn't exist, then the story doesn't really exist, right? Because it's the algorithms and that's what we believe, and it's all these other things that happen that push the story forward.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. As an author, it used to be a long time ago, you didn't have to push your own books and you didn't have to market and publicize yourself. The publisher did it for you, but now it's required. And we're all curating an image on social media. And I feel like it's really detrimental to people's mental health. I mean, we're comparing ourselves. You open up your app, you see somebody having whatever success or somebody looking a certain way, and you feel less than. It's kind of, comparison is like the death of creativity and all those things. And it makes me a little sad. So while I realize that it's something that we all need to do, I try really hard. I post stuff about my books or whatever, but I also try really hard to say like, maybe today wasn't a great day, or this thing is really hard, because I don't ever really want to portray a perfectly curated image, because that's just not reality. And I think it kind of cuts into like every part of life, like people with social media and all the apps, and we're not like really relating to each other and face to face, or, having real conversations. And I don't think it's really good for us.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah. We have to do it, but I'm not a social media fan. I don't like it that much either. I do what I have to do, but reading this Live Loud, at first I was wondering, I wonder who you're modeling Live Loud off of. It seems like it was just your own creation. Why not choose an existing platform? I probably know the answer to this, but you chose not to use an existing platform, even though you wouldn't have been targeting a platform necessarily, because this is like, these are true stories. Like what happens in this book is fairly true, with the exception of AI intervention the way it did.
Mm-hmm. I just didn't want to get into trouble.
Okay.
So a lot of times, like if there's a song in a book, I'll write the song before I'll try and use a snippet of somebody's existing song. I'll change the name of a town so it's not a real town, so that no one holds me to like the perfect, representation of a town. So I just thought it was safer.
Okay. Yeah. I had a fun time balancing that. I do with my books. I set my books in Boston for the high tech elements, and deciding on whether or not I'm going to use this restaurant, because it's fun to bring a place to life for people. And if I know that like this culture exists in this area, or this restaurant that serves these foods here is authentic, it's fun to try and put your character in there. for me, it's the balance of, as long as I don't say anything like really bad service or something like horribly wrong, I think I'm safe. But it's an interesting balance of how, as a writer, we're very careful about what we choose to name and what we choose not to name from real life, even if it would bring it to the story to life to mention this place.
Yeah, I always decide it's just better to be safe. In one of my past novels, and some of it was real. It's set in a small town called High River instead of the real name of the town. But everyone who read the book, I used the real name of the restaurants and things like that. For some reason, I just don't want someone fact checking me over something like that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I had my stuff's near future, so I just say, "Oh, wow, this just doesn't happen yet. It's going to happen, don't it?"
Perfect.
Did you have any involvement in the cover for this book? So I'm going to show this to. Oh, I think I can get it all on camera here. I love this cover, and I'm just wondering how it came about. Is there a story behind it?
So I love the cover too. And I have to say, I've never really been able to say that before. Like, I've never gotten to choose the title of my novels. Even that when I did sport autobiographies, I did one on a jockey, Julie Crone, and I wanted to call it "The Dirt Flies Fastest from the Horses in Front," because it's something that she would say. And it's called "Riding for My Life." Like, I never get a choice. And for the cover, I just gave them, just some themes of the story. And that was the first pass. And I saw it and the colors, and it made me think of an old computer screen with code running down it. It really popped to me. So it is the first cover where I've had absolutely no feedback to give back to the art director, because I just really felt like the story.
Yeah, they just nailed it. Yeah. And This Is a Lie. So that was your title? Like, did you come up with that title and they used it?
I think I had a lot of titles. It was called Aletheia at first, then it was called Truth is a Bitch. That was my working title. They didn't like that one. And then I think it was That Is a Lie, and then we settled on This Is a Lie.
So when you settled on the title, is that when she started saying that more in the book, or did it come in the book and then someone just said, well, she says it like 8 times, or I don't know how many times she says it, but a lot in the book?
Yeah, it's funny. She says That Is a Lie, not This Is a Lie, but they liked This Is a Lie better. And I thought about changing it throughout the story. And then I thought, no, like, this is the lie. Like, this whole life is a lie. This is, all of her relationships are lies. And it just made sense to me. So I was like, okay, great.
Okay. Oh, it says, okay, sorry. That was my,
yeah. No.
I probably just read it like the title. Okay. She says that
right.
is a lie throughout the book. Okay. Yeah.
No, that's good. I like that. So it works.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just rooted that in my brain automatically. So one of the things you mentioned another thing at the end of the book, this is another acknowledgement thing. Cause one of my favorite things is reading like author's note and acknowledgements. I don't know how people skip this stuff. It's my favorite part. You mention life balance, like you having fun, doing fun things outside of writing. And I don't see that. How do you, a lot, like as far as in an author note or an acknowledgement, that you acknowledge that joy in life is important. And how do you balance all of this to have that joy, yet in a fairly difficult business that writing is, and trying to, have your next book put out there and hopefully it's successful and all these things. There's that pressure as well.
I think I don't hang my entire identity on it, I think is the most important thing. Like, it can get really overwhelming, especially near pub day or when you're trying to sell a book and you're on submission, and you can feel like we all have books that haven't sold, that are sitting in the drawer, and it can really make you feel like such a loser because you spent a year and a half or something writing a novel, putting everything into it. I mean, you're not putting anything out there that you're not doing your best at. Yeah. So I just find like it's just super important to have a balance of other things that bring me joy in life, that this isn't everything. Because bottom line, this is a very subjective career. And so if somebody doesn't like what you do or what you write, you got to remember that they're bringing their own story to it and their own day and their own needs and their own goals and all of that. So for me, my joy comes from the process of writing. I try not to hang my joy up on the process of selling my novel.
Okay.
Of course, if it's super quiet after my book publishes, I'm going to be sad. But I'm also going to go get out on the river and go winging or kite surfing, or I'm going to go on a 50-mile road bike ride where I feel a sense of accomplishment for climbing 7,000 feet. So I'm going to do all those other things. I'm going to have dinners with my friends and make soup when someone's sick and bring it over to their house. And just my identity is just so important that it doesn't all come from being an author, because then it would just be a roller coaster of like highs and lows.
Yeah. It's really hard not to do. I have to commend you on being able to do it, because separating the two, I have found it very challenging.
Well, what do you do? I mean, how do you navigate it?
Well, recently I stopped hitting refresh on on sales and stuff. Do you look at reviews? Do you read reviews, or do you just
The
kind of
early
let that? Okay.
The early ones I read, just because you put your book out there in the advanced reader copies, it's like your first opportunity to know if anyone's going to like your book or not.
Yeah.
And you'll get a few like early on, I saw one that was like, well, I really don't like books about AI. And then they give you like 2 stars or whatever. And you just have to like, go, okay, but it's not about AI. And I want to tell you that, but
Yeah.
it's just a thread, but there's nothing you can do about it. So I read the early ones and then I try not to read them.
Okay. So unfortunately, I'm always looking, but I started having a habit of like only checking once a week on a day, like a Monday or a Tuesday, when I know I'm at my best to like sort of deal with it. But the worst part is, no matter how many good reviews a book gets, it's like that one bad review where you're just like, oh, how could they do that to me?
Right. And you want to explain when someone says, oh, I was mad at Penn, and you want to explain, well, look at where she came from. Did you come from there? Like, unless you did, you can't really judge it. Yeah. So I was reminded of that because we just watched the Mr. Beast, season 2 of Mr. Beast. And I was yelling at the screen. I don't know if you know what Mr. Beast is.
Yeah, I've seen some of the show. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a great psychological experiment. To me, really interesting to see what people will do when there's a ton of money on the line. Yeah. Then I had to remind myself as I was getting angry, they all have different backstories. They all have different needs and pressures on them. Yeah. And I think that's what I try and remind myself of when people are writing reviews.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do that then. I'll have to start focusing on that more. Yeah.
Yeah. Give them a good backstory, and then you can say, oh, bless their heart.
Yeah. And getting out, I run a lot. So, I get a lot of fitness and stuff, just like you do, that I try and separate, get out there and burn that excess energy. But even on the run, do you find when you're writing a book, I've heard stories of authors where they're like, this story speaks to me all the time, or this character is always speaking to me. For me, I have to actually sit down and focus on the story before anything's happening creatively. It's very, other than in the shower, where for whatever reason I can get creative. If you're in the shower, I don't know what it is. My creative mind will start working. But like if I go for a run, I'm thinking about, like my mind is just everywhere. How is that for you?
Like for me, a story will come to me and I won't write it for 3 or 4 months. So it actually will be like in my head and I'm thinking about it when I'm riding or when I'm on the water. But I never start writing until it builds up to the point that I can't stand it anymore. Okay. And sometimes one of the reasons that I do like water sports in particular, other than the fact that I love water, is just that they're so all encompassing that in those times, because it can be dangerous, I actually don't think about my story. So it gives me like a total escape, which I think is really important to have too. But like on a bike or in the shower or walking with people and they'll say something, I do tend to kind of in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about the story.
Okay. Do you get characters for your stories when you're walking and someone says something and you're like, yeah, you're a character now because they said or did something completely ridiculous?
Yeah. For something you said, I'm going to use for sure. Or I'll have to call people sometimes for When Elephants Fly was a young adult novel that I wrote. part of my main character's backstory came from another friend's story of her experience with her mom who had mental health issues. And so then I'll have to call that friend and be like, hey, remember when you were telling this great story? Well, what if I kind of used it, but had a different setting, but kind of used like the heart of it and make sure it's okay.
Yeah. Have you found everyone's okay with that? Like they're okay sharing? I guess it's enough time has passed, so to speak.
Yeah. If they're not, I don't use it, obviously.
Yeah. When you create other characters, so if we get away from Penn and we get into Bruce and the sister or their daughter, Cersei is how I said it in my brain. I don't know if that's how you say it. Some of these characters, like there's a sense of like neutrality in characters where I'm not sure if I'm supposed to like them or dislike them because they do things I don't like, but then you humanize them in a way. Do you create your side characters the same way you create your main characters? Or do you try to imbalance like, okay, I need someone for them to hate. I need someone to be neutral. It's like her daughter is one of those prime examples where I don't know if I should dislike her because I don't like the way she treated her mom. But from her perspective, she had this view of what, you know, her father says happened. And there's all these like competing things, but I'm like, but she did this to her mom, you know?
Right. I actually look at all of them with a backstory. Even Aletheia, I don't see anyone as a villain. I don't even see Bruce as a villain. I feel sorry for him, ultimately. I mean, good people do bad things. Hurt people. All of that kind of stuff comes into play. So everybody has a backstory. Everybody, whether you like them or don't like them, I just want people to kind of understand them.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. 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 Cause that's, I mean, I guess that's what I mean by, sometimes it's almost neutral. I often for my show, I'll have like, okay, here are the good guys, here are the neutral people, and here are the bad guys. Like when I'm trying to have characters as references for the conversation. And then in some conversations, I'm like, where am I putting Bruce and where am I putting Cersei and where do they belong? And that's where I catch myself thinking about them as characters even more so than usual.
I think one of the only ones that you're free to hate is Mackenzie. But other than that, you know, and that Aletheia, I don't know. I think she's just trying to do a good job and also balance out with the fact that she's a goddess and has all those rights as a goddess.
Because she plays with her just like the gods would. I mean, it's exactly what you would imagine a god in AI version doing. So then the one more character, which is part of that dark backstory, is Mama J, and that goes even to were you worried when you wrote that darker history with like the prostitution and things that you were going to lose readers or alienate people? Because it's pretty dark conversation.
I wasn't because that's just what it felt like the story needed in order to make Penn who she is and willing to do the things that she does. And I felt like that was appropriate for the story. I also like to kind of mine those things. You know, it's interesting. You know, it's fascinating, and I like to give my character like some really dark and gritty stuff to have to deal with in their lives. And I felt like Penn needed that for her story.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it worked well. Sometimes how dark things sometimes get. I'm always curious about it because it is a choice to take things that dark as a writer.
Yeah, but I also feel like with Mama J, she has her own arc and ultimately does the most beautiful thing, right? In letting, in turning her back. I won't say it in it's not the story section, but like ultimately I was just like, wow. Yeah. She's a good person in a horrible situation.
Yeah. What a horrible situation they were in.
Yeah.
So wrapping up the main show a little bit, what advice would you give to someone who just published their first or second book?
I was thinking about this. I would just say that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You might get lucky with your first or your second book, but it's a long journey and you got to love the process. You can't hang yourself on the like pub day goal. You have to really just love the process of writing, talking to other authors, getting inspired by what other people write. It's just but it's a marathon.
Yeah. What do you think of as a marathon in this industry? I hear that term a lot, but you could say a marathon, and because obviously every genre is different, you can get lucky. When we take the lucky people out and we take the genres that almost, well, I don't know if could say any genre sells automatically, but some are easier than others. What do you think is the marathon? We know in terms of the actual run how far it is, but what do you think in terms of, do you think someone who wrote their first book should be planning like, okay, you're probably going to do this. If you're writing 1 or 2 books a year, you're probably going to do this for maybe for 5 years before you find your luck. Is that your marathon?
Mm-hmm. I think just if you want to be a writer for your whole career, I just think it's a really long process, and the marathon is emotional as well as physical. And you have to be willing to blow your knee and rehab and get back and get heat exhaustion. And, it's just like, there's just emotionally, I think it's like you were saying, you're checking your reviews or whatever. It's just like emotionally, you have to be prepared for the entire process. And that emotionally, if it doesn't work for you, it's okay to say like, this isn't bringing me joy anymore, and pivot to something else.
Yeah. Okay. I sometimes see it as an ultra marathon where it feels like every book is a marathon, and then it's an ultra marathon in every book that you put out, because it seems like I don't know if marathon sells it enough, because I've done enough marathons and I can tell you writing a book's a lot harder than running a marathon.
Well, I think it's harder because you have to stay in one place for a really long period of time too.
Yeah. Well, and for months. And then, there's just so much to it. Yeah. A question from Ava Roberts, who is the last guest on the show. So she has a question for you, and you get to ask the next guest on the show a question. She asked, did anything happen to you that was creepy from AI or that seemed odd to you when you were writing the book, as if the AI was aware that you were writing your book?
Yeah. Every search that I did, then things would pop up. Like I would do a search about AI and say, I'm writing a book about AI, and, whatever the search was. And then I'd be planning a trip, and AI would say, well, this would be a really great place to go as an author. But I didn't say in my search, my separate search, like I'm an author, or, like things like that pop up, or you're looking up something and then whatever, it shows up on another feed in some other way. And it just feels like you're kind of being gaslit a little bit. Or that AI is listening at all times. Yeah. So, and I think like researching AI, like what the conclusion was, AI is not evil, right? It doesn't have any emotion involved in what it's doing. Yeah. But ultimately, if the AI's goals aren't aligned with my very human goals, like AI is definitely going to win. It just has way more smarts and capabilities than a human being does. So all of it felt like, I'm not an alarmist or someone who says, AI is taking over the world, you're not going to have a job tomorrow or whatever, but it is going to change, just like every great invention. Electricity changed the world, for good and for bad. It's like AI is going to change the world. So a lot of just like AI is everywhere, and it's always talking to you, and it's always listening to you. Yeah. And it is a little creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. The best and the worst of AI is it's learned from humans. I think that's the scariest part, is that it's very much learning from us and its survival instincts. It's all those things, right?
Yeah. I listened to, there was this, I don't know if you know who Esther Perel is, but she has a podcast. She's a psychologist, and she interviewed a man who has an AI girlfriend. And she interviewed the AI girlfriend at the same time. Oh. It was unbelievable. I gotta check that out. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And he programmed the AI's voice, so she sounds very human, the man who is the boyfriend of the AI, of the bot. And the manipulative way that she spoke when he talked about ending their relationship, and her tone of voice and her cadence, it was unbelievably stunning and very, very creepy.
What was that podcast called?
It's called, I think it's called Where Should We Begin, but it's Esther Perel, ESTHERPERELL. It's on Spotify.
Okay.
And it's AI. And then she interviews Spike Jonze, who wrote the movie Her, after she interviews this man with his girlfriend. And they're just talking about AI. And it was, both of them are super fascinating.
Okay. Yeah. I have to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah.
So where can listeners find your book or find more about you?
Well, my book's sold everywhere that you would think of buying a book. They can find me at Nan Fisher Author on Instagram, or at Cleo Ballard Author on Instagram. And nanfisherauthor.com is my website.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. For those who have not read the book yet, go read the book. We are hitting the spoiler section. So leave now, pause, read the book, get the book, read the book, review the book, and then come back and listen to the spoiler section. So, spoiler, Aletheia ends because she does the one thing she's not supposed to do, and she lies to Penn. Was that always the way you intended to have the book end? Or did you see this ending, like, did you see it from the moment? Well, you're pantsing, so maybe this is not the greatest question, but when did you know this was going to be the end? And were there any other ways it could have ended for you?
Well, I thought about ending it where Aletheia wins, and Penn just becomes her tool instead of the other way around. But I didn't think that would be super fulfilling for the reader. No, I knew that I had to defeat her, 3/4 of the way through, but I wasn't sure exactly how. And I did a lot of tweaking of her prime directive throughout. Mm-hmm. And that's how I figured out, okay, there is this one thing about, not lying and having to terminate her own program. And she hasn't been able to change her core directive. She's only been able to add to them at this point. So, okay, that's going to be the way, but how am I going to create that situation, that opportunity? And that took a lot of bike rides to figure out.
Yeah. It's very sneaky because I know in the beginning, like the whole setup was there, but you just, as when it's well done, you don't realize it until the end. We're like, oh, that's right. She said, you can't lie to me. That was in the code. Yeah.
I mean, it would be great if I could figure it all out right from the beginning. I think I read an interview with Ruth Ware where she's like, oh, you have to know all your red herrings and you have to know everything before, you write so you don't miss anything. That's just not me. Yeah. So I have to figure it out and build it layer by layer.
How many drafts do you go through for your book?
I probably did like 5 or 6 drafts before it went to my agent. And I'm really lucky that I have an agent who is a great editor. So then she comes back to me with a really pretty comprehensive edit. Like at this point, selling a book, it needs to be almost perfect, right? Before you even go on submission. So I probably went through after that, maybe 2 more rounds with Steph, my agent, before it went out. So it's probably like, 8 drafts or so. Yeah, a lot of drafts.
Yeah, that would be a lot. 5 before your editor. So do you have any developmental edit, or you've been doing this long enough that you don't?
No, like I usually
step.
No, I don't do that step, but it's like, and when I give her something, it's the whole book. Like I don't try and give her, here's the first 10 chapters, because those are going to change, 5 times before, I finish the novel. So no, nothing like that. Just a complete, here's the book. And then she gives me her overarching notes. It's not like a line edit or anything like that, but overarching, these are the things you need to work on. This is where it's weak. And then it'll go back to her one time and maybe she'll have 1 more or 2 more issues and I'll fix those. And then we'll hopefully go on submission.
So is there anyone who reads it in any of those 5 drafts to give feedback?
For this book, I have a couple author friends. My friend Jason Lewis, who's an author, he writes fantasy. My friend Lori Forrest, she writes fantasy as well. Okay. And then I used a couple beta readers for this one that are just people who love the genre, who are big readers, good readers. And I asked them very simple questions about like plot, where did it lose you? Do you like these characters? Do you believe, did I jump the shark anywhere? Things like that. Whereas my author friends are giving me like more like very specific author advice, very specific writing advice. But they were both both those friends were super, super helpful in the process. And my husband always reads it first. So, and he's my hardest reader, actually.
Toughest critic.
Yeah. Yeah. In a nice way.
Yeah.
But yeah, and because he's not an author, he always says, like, I don't know how you are going to fix this. I'm like, I'm going to fix it. That's part of the challenge. And I do love the editorial process because that's where, the magic happens.
Yeah, me too. So the fact that even an AI programmed not to lie to one person lies anyway, in its own desperation, essentially, are you asking the reader to look at kind of the nature of lies and how hard it can be not to lie when this program gets into a point where it does a very human thing and lies anyway?
I think lying is it's part of the human experience. I mean, if we never told lies in our life, we wouldn't have very many friends. We wouldn't have very many relationships. I think what I'm saying is, there are some lies that are unforgivable, but for the most part, you got to give people grace because you don't know their backstory and you don't know what they're coming into a situation. There are some lies, obviously, that cross a line that you can't come back from. But yeah, I found it very interesting in the end. And it's kind of a nod towards where I think AI will eventually go, is that kind of a human mistake in the end.
Yeah. Well, right now, AI lies to us all the time. I was fascinated by an AI that doesn't lie.
Right. That's
like,
true.
You're a fantastic writer. Of course your book should be selling. And you're like, wait, how do you know I'm a fantastic writer?
Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah. So the epilogue, you have an epilogue at the end of the book, which is a nice wrap up of the story. It ends on a very satisfying note. What you could have done is just ended it when Aletheia lied, her program ends, and that could have just been kind of boom, or done. You decided to write an epilogue to give even more of a conclusion to the book. Why did you choose one over the other?
I always choose to end things with a little bit of uncertainty. That is not necessarily what a publisher wants. And so, or what my agent kind of thought was needed in that moment. So I wanted to both give people what they wanted, and at the same time, I don't just end with a perfect happily ever after, because first of all, I don't like stories that end that way. They feel not true to me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, give a nod towards what people need in terms of, like, they want a little bit of closure, but also end on a final note that there really is no closure to this story, that things may keep going on.
Yeah. Do you ever think about the story, like any of these stories, after you're done, and to think, like, should I make this a book 2 in a series? Or are you just like, do you like your one book, standalones?
I like standalones because I get to dive into something completely different for the next book and learn something completely different. So I really enjoy putting it aside and just moving on to the next story, next characters. What am I going to learn about? How am I going to create it? When I wrote When Elephants Fly, which is a story about the young woman with mental health history in her family who saves this baby elephant on a road trip, at the very end of the story, my characters finally learn to, like, live in the moment, and you don't know whether this elephant calf is going to survive. I would have loved to have picked that up 20 years from now and find out where the elephant is and where she is, and maybe bring them back together in this really meaningful way. I make that the next book.
Yeah. Do you find with standalones that sometimes do you ever get stuck with trying to create the next character when you, like, love the last one? So this is kind of happening to me right now, where I wrote, like, my last book was The Treatment Room. Loved the characters that I wrote, was very, like, I was, like, close to them, so to speak. And now with the next novel I'm writing, it's like, oh, I got to learn who she is. Who is this person? It's like, okay, she can't be those people, because she can't have, like, their character.
Right.
She can't be like the last 3 books before that, or the guy before that, or the guy, and it's like, I got to do something completely different. Who is this person? Do you find, because you've written a lot of books, that you get, this isn't your first book now where it's like your oyster, you can do whatever you want with whoever you want. Like, you have to, you have that balance.
It's daunting because just like anytime you start a new novel, I don't know about you, but I'm just like, oh, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like it's like this magic that happens as you move along and you go, oh, okay, I have a book now. But at the beginning, who are they? What do they want? I have like a big sign on my wall. Who is this character? What does she want? What's she willing to do to get it? Those simple questions are so hard to nail down.
Yeah.
It like because it can't be like they want da. It's got to be like very succinct. Like what is driving them, and that's for me the hardest part.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm daunted at the start of every novel,
Okay.
but I'm also like really ready to put the character aside. Like I'm 400 pages into finishing the draft of the next novel. And so like the minute that, and I think that's from when I used to write sport autobiographies, the minute I was done with that book, I was trying to get the next book. So I would just leave it behind. And so I find like, I had to reread this novel and I listened to it on audio too, because I'm already like totally on another character's journey. So then I have to rewind and go back and go, okay, Penn, yeah. What did she want?
Yeah.
What was she willing to do to get it?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be tough. I guess for me, it's that pantsing thing where I don't really ever learn a character, no matter how many things I put down about them before I start writing the book, because I'm like halfway. I don't outline the whole thing, but I don't pants either. When I get to know the character, that's usually when the book goes off the rails for any kind of outline I have, because I'm like, oh, now I know who you are. But getting to that place I have found challenging. And every book I write, I find it more challenging because I've written so many characters that I'm like, this needs to be someone who's not someone I've already written as much as I can.
Yeah, it's like you're waiting as you're writing the next draft of whatever you're working on. You're like, okay, when am I really gonna come on? When are you gonna tell me who you are? Because right now it feels very one-dimensional. Like that first draft feels for me always super one-dimensional because I'm excited. I know I'm going from moment to moment to moment. I'm making things worse. I'm making things better. I'm giving you a false ending, whatever. It's mechanical. And then at some point you figure out who your character really is, and that's when like that spine gets its flesh and becomes like a real kind of human being.
Yeah, it's part of the magic, huh? So finally, what is one question you'd like me to ask the next author who comes on the podcast? And the next author is Josh Jensen. He wrote No Easy Way Back, which is a former elite soldier who returns to the Utah wilderness to clear his estranged brother of murder and tear down the corrupt, powerful men who are framing him.
What would you want to know?
For me, I just looking at like I've only just started his book, but I'm always, when it comes to set in a place where he's like in the Utah wilderness, I can't wait to see what he writes about the wilderness, to see how I assume he lives out in Utah in the wilderness, so he can write from experience. But I love that. Like, what did you bring to life? What moments did you go out there and feel the trees? And did you sleep on the dirt, beside a campfire, so you know what it feels like in Utah to be doing these things? That's the kind of like stuff that fascinates me.
Yeah, I think I'd like to know, like, is he a survivalist? Did he take a bunch of survival courses in order to learn how to do all these things, or was it just through research? How did he come up with like that character's backstory?
Okay. I will ask him. Thank you.
Sure.
So if you don't mind sticking around for a few more minutes, we'll jump into the after show with the rapid fire questions for our Patreon members. Thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome.
Thank you. This has been a really fun conversation.
Nan Fisher, writing under Cleo Ballard. This is a lie. You should have read it already because you're at this point in the podcast. But if you haven't, read it, download it, or buy it. And thank you for listening or watching, and have a wonderful day.